We are almost a month into 2025 and it has been a cold one so far, a bit different than we expected. Will we get to the warm and dry forecast that La Nina led us to believe, or does it look like more cold and maybe normal rain? Shelby and I will dig into that in the January 2025 edition of the Water Resources Outlook. Take it away, Shelby.
Thanks, Todd. In the last 30 days, we've seen frontal systems move through the area, providing precipitation in the form of rain and snow. The greatest precipitation totals during the period were in the Mobile, Alabama area. The lowest rainfall accumulations were along Interstate 85 in South Carolina and the entirety of our North Carolina basins. The Carolinas and part of Central Florida were restrained to accumulations only as great as 1 inch. The 30-day departure shows us that although the entire southeast received precipitation, the accumulations were mostly near normal or a few inches below normal. In the areas of the least precipitation mentioned on the previous slide, those coincide with where we see precipitation deficits as great as 3 inches. Though normal and below normal represent a more significant portion of our area, there were some areas that received above normal precip. Those areas were along Interstate 10 and in parts of North Florida, including Jacksonville, and in areas of Orlando, and also down in the Florida Everglades. This month, the 30-day departure is also inclusive of our year-to-date departure, and so we are starting the year with below normal to normal rain amounts. To give us a further look back, this is the 90-day departure from normal. The spots of above normal cover less area than in the 30-day, and we can see larger areas of below normal rainfall where deficits are up to 4 inches. So, although frontal systems continue to provide precipitation on a weekly to biweekly basis, the accumulations have remained light. This graphic shows 7-day runoff for the past year for the South Atlantic and Gulf states. Last January, we were full swing into El Nino and seeing ample rainfall. This led to runoff mostly remaining normal for the month. This year, we have not received a significant precipitation event that would bound the runoff into normal to above normal conditions, and with La Nina conditions, normal to below normal rainfall accumulations are expected to continue through the season. We are currently seeing the runoff fall below to much below normal percentiles because of this. Looking at the 28-day stream flow by state and location, we see widespread rivers across the states falling below average. Most of the rivers below normal are in the Carolinas, where we saw the 2 to 3 inch deficit of rainfall in the last 30 days, and in the state of Alabama, where below normal rainfall has been a trend for some time now. In Georgia, a few headwater rivers have reached and fallen below normal flow. South Georgia and the Florida Panhandle remain the largest areas in the southeast where rivers are at normal flow. The below normal rainfall is starting to introduce short-term or moderate drought conditions along the Georgia and Alabama border. The Florida Panhandle and central to eastern North Carolina are also seeing the short-term drought emergence. Since January 7th, the percent of area experiencing moderate drought conditions has increased about 7%. As of January 21st, about 30% of the Southeast is not experiencing drought conditions. This drought monitor change map is displaying if and how drought class has changed since our last WRO. As shown in a 30-day departure, many areas have been consistently dry. Abnormally dry conditions expanded over western North Carolina, and moderate drought expanded over central North Carolina. Moderate drought also expanded over parts of northern South Carolina. Abnormally dry conditions and moderate drought improved over North Florida, while moderate drought expanded over Central Florida. Abnormally dry conditions also improved over some areas of central and eastern Alabama, where 6 to 8 inches of rainfall were observed over the 30-day period. Though January through April is typically a period of high stream flow for the southeast, La Nina conditions will likely continue to play a significant role in our rainfall pattern. I will now hand the mic over to Todd to discuss the upcoming weather as well as future predictions for rainfall potential.
So I will be doing the meteorology today, so let's get started. So the rainfall that the southeast received during Monday was from a low pressure system that moved across the southeast and now is first pushed far enough south that we have lingering moisture in Florida. And by tomorrow, the low pressure has been replaced with high pressure, drier air, and generally nice conditions. On Wednesday, high pressure will center over southern Alabama and western Florida, leaving much of the area with nice conditions. However, low pressure is beginning to make its way into Texas and begins working its way eastward. Thursday sees the low pressure continue to develop and move across Texas. Parts of Mississippi are expected to receive rain, but generally the southeast will see nice weather conditions. On Friday, the low will move across the southeast, bringing rain chances with it. Much of the southeast will receive rain, with moderate amounts of rain expected to fall along much of the Alabama and northern Georgia area. Rainfall totals of 3/4 to 1.5 inches are expected, with locally heavier amounts possible. The low pressure continues eastward on Friday, bringing light rain to points south and east of the associated cold front. Points east of the cold front will see drier conditions and generally nice weather for January. On Sunday, the weather remains warm and dry for much of the southeast, with only extreme southern Florida receiving light precipitation. The 7-day precipitation forecast calls for much of Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia to receive rainfall amounts around 1 to 1.5 inches. Lesser amounts are expected in the Carolinas, with southern Florida receiving very little rain. The long-term outlook calls for most of the southeast to receive above average rainfall, while the southern portion of the southeast is expected to see normal to below average amounts. So now I'll take you from the short and medium range outlook to a little longer range outlook. The February monthly outlook for rainfall looks dry for most of the southeast, with above normal creeping into the northwest portion of our area. This is a classic La Nina pattern, and the short and medium term models are finally beginning to reflect that. And how is the La Nina progressing? If we are in a La Nina, it is just barely, and going forward, we may end up not staying in La Nina long enough for this episode to truly be classified as a La Nina. As we push through winter and into spring, we lean towards warmer equatorial sea surface temperatures and a shift to neutral conditions. Certainly does make the forecast from winter to spring a little more complicated. This is our seasonal temperature outlook from last month. And while we may get some warming and be warm for the rest of winter, January certainly has been cold. Will it be cold enough to make us near normal for January through March seasonal outlook? Time will tell. Because this is our current seasonal outlook for temperatures from February through April, and it still remains warm, and this will likely have an impact on our soils and in turn our rivers and reservoirs as we green up through the seasonal period. The rainfall outlook for February through April looks very similar to the February monthly outlook due to the influence of La Nina. Many of the headwaters of some of the larger river systems in the southeast still have equal chances for above, below, or near normal rainfall. If we see normal rainfall in those areas, many of our reservoirs and streams could come out of the winter in pretty good shape. March will be a crucial month with respect to rain as we approach the summer. And lastly, our seasonal outlook for May through July shows a bit of a wet signal across all of the Atlantic side of our area and getting all the way over into Alabama. If we get wet at this time, it could help us stay in decent shape as we head into the summer. And so the bottom line, in the short term, the drought footprint is not changing a whole lot as we remain somewhat active. So it looks like in the short term, we could see some relief in some areas. Things aren't likely to change a whole lot as far as the drought monitor goes. As for the long term, the weak La Nina lingers, and then we'll transition to more neutral conditions. And what does that mean? Well, it means the forecast continues to be for warmer and drier than normal, but with the neutral conditions coming, that transition into maybe more normal rainfall conditions might come a little bit earlier. We're going to have to see, and we're going to have to watch it real closely as we get through the rest of winter and start to approach spring. And we'll talk a bit more about that in next month's Water Resources Outlook, which we expect to record on February 20th. Have a great month.